Most people today think that if something breaks, you have to buy a new one, or you have to run to the hardware store and buy some expensive, branded miracle glue that's mostly just plastic and fancy marketing. But if you look back at how things were built in the 1930s, before the massive corporations took over the home improvement aisle, you'll find a secret. A literal white powder that costs $2, lasts forever, and seals cracks that modern silicone sealants can't even touch. The construction industry has been quiet about this since 1936. Why? Because you can't charge a premium for a material that costs pennies and doesn't need a fancy applicator gun. Today, I'm going to show you how to use this, why it was buried by modern industry, and how you can use it to seal almost anything, anywhere, for the rest of your life. But there is one major catch. If you mix this powder wrong, you're just making expensive mud. I'll show you the exact ratio to make it hard as stone in a few minutes. First, though, I want to take you back. Not to a YouTube trend, not to a TikTok hack, but to real life. The kind of life where knowing this one thing could mean the difference between a warm cabin and a frozen nightmare. Picture this. It's 1932. You're a trapper somewhere in the northern backcountry. Winter's breathing down your neck. Your cabin, the one thing standing between you and the cold, has cracks running through the logs. Winds push through like the walls aren't even there. Your stovepipes leaking smoke into the room. Your tools are showing wear. There's no hardware store. No Amazon. No truck coming to save you. You've got what you carried in, what you traded for, and what you know. And what you know is this. There's a white powder, cheap as dirt, simple as rain, that can seal every one of those cracks tight enough to last decades. Not months, not a couple seasons. Decades. Builders knew it. Blacksmiths knew it. Homesteaders knew it. It came in plain paper sacks. Sometimes just wrapped in cloth. Nothing fancy about it. But it held cabins together through brutal winters. It sealed chimneys that never leaked again. It patched root cellars that kept food dry and safe for years. And then somewhere around the mid-1900s, it just vanished. Not because it broke down. Not because something better came along for the user. But because something more profitable came along for the seller. Synthetic sealants. Epoxies. Silicones. Polymer compounds. All patented. All mass-produced. All marketed with bright labels and bold promises. And all designed to do one thing the old white powder never did. We're out. Because a product that lasts forever is a terrible business model. You sell it once and the customer never comes back. But a product that cracks in 2 years? That's a subscription. That's repeat revenue. That's a shareholder's dream. So the powder got pushed aside. Not banned. Not recalled. Just quietly removed from the conversation. Retailers stopped carrying it. Construction manuals stopped mentioning it. And within a generation, most people forgot it ever existed. But the powder didn't care about any of that. It still worked. And it still works today. The powder is called sodium silicate. Some people call it water glass. And before you let those words bounce off your brain because they sound too science-y, let me break it down as simple as I can. Sodium silicate is made from 2 things. Sand and soda ash. That's it. 2 of the most common, most abundant materials on this planet. No toxic petrochemicals. No synthetic polymers. No laboratory mystery ingredients. Just basic earth chemistry that humans have understood for centuries. In its dry form, it's a fine white powder. It looks like baking soda. Nothing special to look at. But mix it with water and something changes. It turns into a thick, slippery liquid, kind of like egg whites, but heavier. And when you paint that liquid onto a crack, a seam, a joint, anything with a gap, and you let it dry, it hardens into a glass-like seal. Waterproof, fireproof, resistant to rot, insects, mold, and even mild acids. And here's the part that really sets it apart from modern sealants. It doesn't just sit on the surface. It soaks in. It bonds with the material at a structural level. Wood fibers, stone pores, metal surfaces. It becomes part of whatever you put it on. That's why cabins chinked with sodium silicate in the 1920s are still standing right now. Over 100 years later. Solid. Tight. No leaks. Meanwhile, houses built 10 years ago with modern silicone are already cracking around the windows. This isn't my opinion. This is documented. Construction records from the 1920s and 30s show sodium silicate used in bridges, dams, water treatment plants, and industrial buildings all across the United States. The U.S. Forest Service used it to preserve wooden structures at remote ranger stations, places where nobody was coming back to do maintenance every year. It had to work once and work forever. And it did. The military used it during World War II to seal fuel tanks, repair field equipment, and waterproof storage containers. When failure meant lives lost, they didn't reach for the fancy stuff. They reached for the stuff that actually worked. Sodium silicate. $2. 2 ingredients. 200 years of proof. Now here's the part one promised you. How to actually use it. And more importantly, how to use it right. Because remember what I said at the start. Mix it wrong, and you're just making expensive mud. First, get the powder. You won't find it at most hardware stores anymore. That's by design. But it's still out there. Online suppliers, specialty chemical shops, even some farm supply stores carry it. Look for a sodium silicate powder or water glass powder. Make sure it's technical grade or food grade. No additives. No fillers. No mystery ingredients. Just pure sodium silicate. A 1-pound bag runs about $2. And that 1 pound will last you longer than you think. Now, the mixing ratio. This is where most people mess up. 1 part powder to 2 parts warm water. Not hot. Not cold. Warm. Stir it slowly and steady until every grain is dissolved. No lumps. No grit at the bottom. It should turn into a smooth, thick liquid, slippery between your fingers, almost like a thin syrup. Too thick and it won't penetrate the crack. It'll just glob on the surface and flake off when it dries. Too thin and it won't build up enough strength to seal anything properly. 1 to 2. That's the ratio. Respect it. Once your solution is mixed, apply it directly to the crack or seam. Use a brush, a stick, a rag, even your bare finger if that's all you've got. The goal is to work it deep into the gap. Don't just paint the surface. Push it in. Let it soak. Let it grab onto the material. Then walk away. Give it time. In dry, warm conditions, you're looking at 24 to 48 hours for a full cure. In cold or damp conditions, it could be longer. Don't touch it. Don't test it. Don't pick at it because you're curious. Let it do its thing. When it's done, you'll have a seal that's harder than the wood around it. You can sand it, paint over it, even carve it if you need to shape it. It becomes part of the structure, not some rubbery strip sitting on top waiting to peel off next summer. I've used this myself more times than I can count. Sealed cracks in a hand-carved canoe paddle that held up through an entire season of river trips. Patched a leaking metal camp stove that never leaked again. Reinforced the joints in a lean-to shelter during a storm, and that shelter stood when others around it folded. This isn't some theoretical exercise. This is field-tested, backcountry-proven knowledge. And the uses go way beyond just sealing cracks. The old-timers knew sodium silicate as a multi-purpose survival tool, not just a construction fix. Mix it with sawdust, and you've got a fireproof wood filler. Perfect for patching stovepipes, chimney gaps, or any surface near open flame. Modern wood fillers can't touch that. Most of them are flammable. Brush it onto canvas or heavy cloth, and you've got a waterproof, flame-resistant covering. Tarps, tent patches, deer covers. One coat, and the fabric becomes weather-tough without losing its flexibility. And here's one that'll surprise you. They used it to preserve eggs. Whole, raw eggs. Dip them in a sodium silicate solution, let them dry, and those eggs would last months. No refrigeration. No special storage. Just a thin glass-like coating that sealed the shell and kept air out. Homesteaders in the 1930s kept eggs through entire winters this way. 1 powder. Dozens of uses. That's the kind of practical, no-nonsense thinking that built this country. Now let me be straight with you. Because I don't believe in selling people fairy tales. Sodium silicate is not magic. It has limits. It doesn't bond well to plastic or rubber. If you're trying to fix a modern synthetic material, this isn't your answer. It's not flexible. Once it cures, it's rigid. Glass-like. So if you need a seal that moves with the material, like a joint that expands and contracts with temperature, this isn't the right tool. And it needs dry conditions to cure properly. If you're trying to apply it in the pouring rain with no cover, you're going to have a bad time. But those aren't failures. Those are boundaries. Every tool has them. Every material has them. And knowing those boundaries is what separates someone who actually understands their craft from someone who just watches videos and buys products. Because that's the real lesson here. Not just, use this powder instead of that sealant. The real lesson is bigger than that. Somewhere along the way, we stopped learning how things actually work. We started trusting labels instead of knowledge. We started believing that if something costs more, it must work better. And we handed our self-reliance over to corporations who profit from our dependency. The old builders didn't do that. The old trappers didn't do that. They understood their materials. They understood the limits. And they built things that lasted, not because they had better technology, but because they had better knowledge. That's the difference between a consumer and a craftsman. A consumer buys what he's told to buy. A craftsman knows what actually works. And out here, in the real world, in the backcountry, in the places where nobody's coming to help you, craftsman thinking is what keeps you standing. So the next time something cracks in your cabin, your camp, your workshop, your gear, don't reach for a $12 tube of silicone that's going to shrink, yellow, and peel off in 18 months. Think back. Think about the trappers, the builders, the homesteaders who held everything together with grit, common sense, and a $2 bag of white powder. This stuff didn't disappear because it failed. It disappeared because it worked too well for too little money. But the wilderness doesn't care about profit margins. And neither do I. Stay sharp out there.